Mrs. Whitcomb dropped the silver watering can the moment she saw me. Water spilled across her marble walkway as she stumbled backward, pressed one trembling hand to her pearls, and whispered, "Evelyn Harper, how did you get out of rehab?" The words struck harder than any storm I had survived overseas. I stood at the edge of Seabrook Lane with a salt-stained canvas bag hanging from my shoulder, my dark blue rescue uniform still sharp across my chest, and the cold Maine wind cutting through my coat. For years away from Briarport had changed many things, but it had not prepared me for the look in my neighbor's eyes. She was not surprised to see me. She was terrified. I looked past her toward the row of grand coastal homes rising above the harbor like white stone castles. My parents' house sat at the end of the lane, tall and perfect, with black shutters, clipped hedges, and windows that reflected the gray sea. That house had always looked like safety from the outside. I knew better. Inside those walls, love had always come with conditions, obedience had always been called gratitude, and silence had always been mistaken for peace. Mrs. Whitcomb reached into the pocket of her cream cardigan as if she intended to call someone. Her fingers shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. "Your mother said you were in a private treatment center in Arizona," she breathed. "She said you were unstable. She said you were not allowed visitors." For a moment, the whole street seemed to tilt beneath me. The gulls cried above the harbor. A truck rumbled somewhere near the docks. My hand tightened around the strap of my bag until my knuckles burned. I had spent the last 4 years working with an international medical relief team, stitching wounds in flooded villages, carrying children through hurricane water, holding the hands of strangers while their worlds collapsed. And while I was doing that, my mother had buried me alive under a story of shame. I pulled out my identification card and showed it to Mrs. Whitcomb. Her eyes moved from the official seal to my name, then to the small medals pinned above my heart. Confusion softened into horror. She covered her mouth. "Margaret told everyone you had destroyed yourself," she said. She cried at the ladies' luncheon. "Your father said the family was enduring a private tragedy." Of course they did. Richard and Margaret Harper had never feared cruelty. They feared embarrassment. When I was 26, they handed me a future like a contract already signed. I was supposed to take a polished position at my father's waterfront development firm, marry a banker with a family yacht, and smile at charity dinners until my face forgot how to be real. Instead, I chose a field hospital. I chose mud, blood, floodwater, and purpose. That night, my father told me if I walked out wearing work boots instead of an engagement ring, I was no longer his daughter. I believed they had disowned me. I did not know they had redesigned me. Mrs. Whitcomb looked small now, ashamed beneath her perfect hair and diamond earrings. Part of her wanted to apologize. Another part of her wanted to run to the phone and tell the whole street the dead girl had come home wearing honor instead of disgrace. I thanked her quietly, lifted my bag, and turned away from my parents' house. I did not knock on their door. Not yet. Shouting would feed them. Tears would entertain them. Margaret knew how to twist pain into theater, and Richard knew how to turn silence into a weapon. If they had convinced an entire town that I was hidden away in rehab, then the lie was bigger than one cruel conversation. I checked into a small inn near the harbor, where the wallpaper smelled faintly of salt and old rain. Sitting on the edge of the narrow bed, I opened my bag and stared at the bundle of carbon copies I had kept from every letter I sent home. 1 letter every month. From flood zones. From field clinics. From ruined coastal towns where people still thanked God for a cup of clean water. Every envelope had carried the same official routing marks. None had ever come back. That was when the first cold piece of truth settled into place. The Postal Service did not lose 48 letters. Someone in Briarport had touched them. Someone had seen proof that I was not broken, not hidden, not ashamed. Someone knew I was never in rehab. And before I faced my parents, I needed to find the person who had carried my truth in their hands. The harbor woke before the sun did. Fishing boats groaned against their ropes, gulls circled the gray water, and fog rolled through Briarport like a secret trying to hide itself. I walked along the old boardwalk with my collar turned up against the cold, carrying the weight of 48 missing letters in my chest. At first, I tried to tell myself there was a simple explanation. Maybe my parents had thrown the envelopes away unopened. Maybe they had locked them in some drawer beside old tax papers and forgotten they existed. But that comfort did not last. Margaret Harper never forgot anything that threatened her image. Richard Harper never misplaced anything that might cost him control. The letters had reached Briarport. I could feel it. I spent the morning in the public library, sitting beneath the dim yellow light of a brass reading lamp, searching my family's name on the old desktop computer. The screen filled with photographs that made my stomach tighten. My mother in pearl earrings, standing beside flower arrangements. My father in a navy suit, shaking hands with donors. My brother Nolan, smiling like a man born to inherit applause. Then I found the name that changed everything. Harbor Light Recovery Fund. The website opened with soft music and a photograph of my mother staring out over the ocean, her hand pressed to her heart. Beneath her face, elegant text described a family's private heartbreak and a mission to help young women recover from addiction. My name appeared in the second paragraph. Not as Evelyn Harper, medical relief worker. Not as a daughter who had chosen service over comfort. I was described as a beloved child lost to dependency, living in isolation at a private rehabilitation center. My breath turned shallow. They had not only lied about me. They had built a monument on my grave while I was still alive. Scrolling lower, I saw gala photos, donation totals, scholarship announcements, smiling volunteers, and my mother dabbing at dry eyes in every image. Beside her stood a woman I did not know. She had warm brown eyes, graceful posture, and the careful smile of someone trying to carry too much with dignity. Her name was Amelia Harper, listed as program director. Nolan's wife. I clicked on a video. Amelia stood at a podium in a school auditorium, speaking about broken girls who needed second chances. Her voice shook when she mentioned her sister-in-law, a woman she had never been allowed to meet because shame had made her refuse all visitors. She looked sincere. Painfully sincere. Nolan stood behind her with one hand resting on her shoulder, his face solemn, his wedding ring shining under the stage lights. I paused the video and stared at him. My brother had always known how to stand near goodness without becoming good himself. As children, he watched our parents correct my posture, my voice, my dreams. He used to whisper that one day we would both escape. But when I finally walked out, he stayed. He adjusted his silk tie and became exactly what they wanted. Now he had given his wife my false tragedy as a cause to worship. By noon, I knew where I had to go. The Briarport Postal Annex sat near the end of the working pier, a squat brick building surrounded by mail trucks and stacks of salt-stained crates. I waited across the street until an older man in a faded blue postal jacket stepped out through the side door. Samuel Pike. He had delivered mail to Seabrook Lane since I was a girl. Back then, he walked with the straight-backed quiet of a man who had survived storms no one else could see. Age had bent him slightly, but it had not softened his eyes. They were still sharp, steady, and impossible to fool. I crossed the street. His gaze lifted to my face, then dropped to the insignia on my jacket. He did not flinch. He did not call me sick. He did not look afraid. Instead, Samuel removed his cap. "Well," he said softly. "The harbor finally brought you home." Something inside me almost broke. I asked him if he remembered my letters. He looked toward the water. For a long moment, only the gulls answered. Then he motioned for me to follow him behind the annex, where an old wooden bench sat beneath a rusted awning. From a locked storage cabinet, he pulled out a dented gray metal box and placed it between us. The lid opened with a tired scrape. Inside were my letters. All of them. 48 envelopes stacked in careful order, marked by month, place, and weathered postmark. My fingers trembled as I lifted the first one. Across the front, in my mother's elegant handwriting, were the words "Patient refuses contact." The lie looked delicate. Almost beautiful. That made it worse. Samuel's jaw tightened. He told me Margaret had handed the first letter back to him on the porch, claiming I was too unstable to receive mail. But he had seen the routing stamp. He knew it came from an international medical mission, not a treatment center. So he kept it. Then another came. Then another. I could not save you from your family, he said. But I could save the proof. Tears blurred the harbor into silver. For 4 years, I had thought my voice vanished into silence. It had not. It had been waiting in a metal box by the sea. Then Samuel leaned closer, his expression darkening. He told me the fund was under federal review. Certified letters had been arriving for weeks. Tax notices. Audit warnings. Documents addressed not only to my parents, but to Nolan and Amelia. My hands closed around the first envelope. My parents had stolen my name. But someone else might be standing in the fire they started. And this time I was not walking away. Amelia Harper had built her life around helping other people tell the truth. Every weekday morning, she sat across from frightened teenagers in a small counseling office at Briarport High School, listening to the things they could not say at home. She knew the sound of a forced smile. She knew the difference between a secret and a wound. That was why, when the first audit letter landed on the marble breakfast table inside the Harper estate, some quiet part of her heart began to tremble before her mind understood why. The envelope was plain white, stiff, and official. It did not belong among the embossed charity invitations, designer catalogs, and glossy thank you cards that usually arrived for Harbor Light Recovery Fund. The return address carried the seal of a federal tax office. Amelia turned it over in her hands while the morning sun poured through the tall windows, making the ocean beyond the glass glitter like broken crystal. Nolan was upstairs taking a call. Margaret had gone to a luncheon. Richard was at his office. For once, the house was silent. Amelia slid a silver letter opener beneath the flap. The words inside were cold and precise. Missing disclosures. Incomplete charitable expenditure records. Failure to provide requested documentation. Formal review pending. Possible penalties. Her first feeling was not suspicion. It was panic. She thought of the girls she had mentored, the school workshops she had organized, the mothers who cried in her arms because someone had finally offered their daughters a second chance. She thought of Evelyn Harper, the broken sister-in-law she had never met, the woman whose supposed suffering had inspired Amelia to pour her whole soul into the fund. If Nolan had forgotten paperwork, she would fix it. That was what she always did. She fixed what other people neglected. She carried the letter down the hall to Nolan's private study. The room smelled of leather, cedar cologne, and money. Framed sailing trophies lined the walls. His computer slept on the glass desk, sleek and black, waiting like a locked door. Amelia hesitated. Nolan had strict rules about that room. He called them boundaries. Lately, they had started to feel more like bars. But a federal audit was not a household misunderstanding. She woke the screen. The password box appeared. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Nolan believed himself unpredictable, but pride made people careless. He used the same numbers from their anniversary dinner reservation, the same sequence he tapped whenever he thought no one was watching. The computer opened. Amelia searched for tax files first. Then accounting. Then donor records. Nothing made sense. At last, she found a hidden folder labeled disbursements. The word itself felt heavy. She clicked. A spreadsheet filled the screen. At first, the columns blurred. Then the pattern sharpened. Monthly transfers. Large amounts. Repeated dates. No clinic names. No rehabilitation partners. No housing grants. No scholarship payments. The money did not flow outward toward wounded girls. It drained into one private account. The recipient name was Lily Monroe. Amelia's stomach turned cold. She knew that name. Lily had been a summer employee at the Briarport Yacht Club, a quiet young woman with nervous eyes who folded towels near the pool and vanished before autumn. Amelia remembered seeing Nolan speaking to her once behind the boat lockers, his hand resting too close to the girl's shoulder, his smile too smooth. Amelia clicked deeper. Legal correspondence. Scanned letters. Threats from Lily's parents. A proposed settlement. Then emails between Nolan and Margaret. The words struck like stones dropped into deep water. Control the narrative. Protect the family. Use Evelyn's situation. Launch the recovery fund. Keep payments discreet. Evelyn's situation. Amelia covered her mouth. There was no broken sister hidden in treatment. There was a story. A mask. A business plan made from a living woman's stolen name. The study door opened. Nolan stood there in his charcoal suit, one hand still on the brass handle. His eyes moved from Amelia's face to the glowing screen. The warmth vanished from him so quickly it felt rehearsed. "What are you doing?" he asked. Amelia's pulse hammered, but years of counseling frightened children had taught her how fear behaves. If you fight too soon, the room explodes. If you go still, sometimes the danger believes it has won. "I thought there was a tax mistake," she whispered. "I got scared." Nolan crossed the room slowly. His voice softened, but his eyes hardened. He told her she did not understand finance. He told her good women did not dig through their husbands' private files. He told her the fund was bigger than her little school projects. Little. The word landed exactly where he aimed it. Amelia lowered her gaze. She apologized. She made her shoulders fold inward. She let him see the obedient wife he expected. When Nolan turned toward the bar cart to pour a drink, she moved. The flash drive slipped from her pocket into the computer port. Her hand shook only once. She copied the folder, ejected the drive, and closed her palm around it like a prayer. That evening, Amelia packed a small bag and told Nolan she needed to visit her mother for the weekend. He looked relieved. Men like Nolan feared truth, but they always underestimated quiet women. 2 miles from the estate, she pulled into a dark gas station, locked her car doors, and opened the number she had found in Nolan's blocked contacts. Her message was short. "I know the truth about the fund and the girl. I need help." Then Amelia pressed send and waited for the ghost of the Harper family to answer. The message lit up my phone just after midnight, while rain tapped softly against the window of my room above the Harbor Inn. "I know the truth about the fund and the girl. I need help." For a long moment, I simply stared at the words. The room around me felt smaller than before. The narrow bed, the chipped dresser, the old radiator hissing in the corner, all of it seemed to hold its breath with me. The number was unfamiliar, but the fear behind those 2 sentences was not. I had heard that kind of fear in field hospitals, in mothers searching for children after floods, in old men standing in front of homes that no longer had walls. I typed back the address of an all-night diner 2 towns south of Briarport. Then I added only one instruction. "Come alone." I arrived early and chose the booth at the back, the one with cracked red vinyl seats and a clear view of the front door. The rain painted silver lines down the windows. A tired waitress poured black coffee into a thick white mug and left without asking questions. I kept my coat on. I watched every reflection in the glass. At exactly 1 o'clock in the morning, the bell over the door gave a thin metallic cry. Amelia Harper stepped inside. She looked nothing like the polished woman from the charity videos. Her hair was damp. Her face was bare. Her eyes carried the exhausted brightness of someone who had seen a house burn from the inside and was still smelling the smoke. She spotted me in the corner and stopped. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. I wondered if she saw a ghost. She walked toward me slowly and slid into the booth. Her hands were wrapped around a small leather purse, gripping it as if someone might tear it away. We sat in silence until the waitress returned, filled another cup, and disappeared behind the counter. Then Amelia opened her purse and placed a silver flash drive on the table. "I am sorry," she whispered. Her voice cracked on the last word. She told me about the audit letter, Nolan's computer, the hidden folder, and the payments to Lily Monroe. She told me about the legal threats, the yacht club, the way my mother had written my false tragedy into emails like she was planning floral arrangements for a luncheon. Every sentence pulled another stone from the wall my family had built around me. I thought I had understood their cruelty. I had been wrong. They had not invented my shame merely to protect their reputation. They had sold my shame to protect Nolan. They had turned me into a broken daughter so they could turn donor money into silence. Amelia pushed the flash drive closer. Her hands trembled. "I helped them raise that money," she said. "I stood in front of people and cried for you. I thought I was honoring you. I reached into my coat and placed my medical relief identification card beside her coffee cup." Her eyes dropped to it. She read my name. She studied the seal, the date, the photograph of me in a field uniform under a white tent. Her face folded. Nolan had not only lied to the town. He had lied to the woman sleeping beside him every night. "I was never in rehab," I said softly. "I was in flood zones. Field clinics. Emergency shelters. Places where people had lost everything except their will to live." Amelia covered her mouth, and tears slipped through her fingers. I did not comfort her immediately. Some grief deserves space to stand up straight. Across from me sat a woman who had been used as a beautiful mask for something rotten. I knew what that felt like. The bell above the door rang again. I turned sharply. Samuel Pike stepped in from the rain, his old navy jacket dark with water. Behind him came a younger woman in a tailored black coat, carrying a leather portfolio beneath one arm. Her eyes swept the diner once, fast and precise, missing nothing. Samuel walked to our booth and nodded toward her. "This is my daughter, Claire," he said. "She investigates things rich people prefer to keep buried." Claire did not waste time. She sat beside her father, opened her portfolio, and listened while we laid out the pieces. The 48 letters. The false rehab story. The recovery fund. The hidden payments. Lily Monroe. The audit notices. When Claire plugged Amelia's flash drive into her laptop, the blue glow lit her face like winter lightning. She read in silence. The diner clock ticked above the counter. Rain beat harder against the roof. Finally, Claire closed the laptop. "This is not gossip," she said. "This is fraud. This is a public charity being used as a private shield." Amelia looked down. "If we go to the police, Richard will bury it." Claire's mouth tightened. "Then we do not let him bury it." She told us the annual Harbor Light Gala was happening Saturday night at the Briarport Yacht Club. Her station already had press access. Margaret believed Claire was preparing a flattering profile about coastal philanthropy. The cameras would be inside. The donors would be inside. Richard, Margaret, Nolan, Amelia, all of them would be under the lights. Claire looked at me. "You walk in when your mother reaches the part about her lost daughter." The room became very quiet. I saw it then. Not revenge as fire. Revenge as daylight. No screaming. No begging. Just truth entering through the front door in shoes that had walked through storms. The next evening, I stood in my room at the inn and laid out my uniform across the bed. The fabric was dark, clean, and severe. I pinned each metal with slow hands. Not for vanity. For memory. For every frightened stranger who had trusted me when the world split open. My mother had dressed my absence in shame. On Saturday night, I would dress the truth in honor. The Briarport Yacht Club glittered against the black water like a palace built on moonlight and lies. Through the tall windows, I could see crystal chandeliers burning above white tablecloths, silver trays, and flowers arranged in sorrowful shades of cream. Every detail had been chosen to make grief look expensive. I stood in the shadowed hallway outside the ballroom, listening to my mother speak. Margaret Harper's voice floated through the speakers, soft and trembling in all the right places. She thanked the donors for standing beside her family through their long private tragedy. She spoke of a daughter swallowed by addiction, a daughter too ashamed to come home, a daughter whose pain had inspired the Harbor Light Recovery Fund. My name left her mouth like a prayer she had stolen. Inside the ballroom, wealthy couples leaned forward with wet eyes and open checkbooks. Richard sat near the stage, his face carved into noble suffering. Nolan stood beside Amelia at the front table, one hand resting against the back of her chair like a warning. Amelia did not move. She wore a dark green dress and a diamond necklace that sparkled like a collar, but her face was calm. Too calm. She looked like a woman who had already walked out of her cage in her mind. Claire and her camera crew waited near the side wall. Samuel stood at the back with the gray metal box held against his chest. The truth was in position. Margaret paused dramatically. I could picture her lowering her head, letting silence gather around her like perfume. Then her voice sharpened. She praised Nolan for bearing the family burden with dignity. She praised Richard for his strength. Then she turned toward Amelia and said that some people who married into old families never truly understood sacrifice, no matter how sweet their little projects seemed. That was when I reached for the brass handles. The ballroom doors opened with a crack that silenced the room. 200 faces turned toward me. I stepped into the golden light wearing my dark rescue uniform, my medals pinned above my heart, my boots steady against the polished floor. No one spoke. Even the musicians froze with their bows lifted over the strings. My mother stood behind the podium, one hand still gripping her silk handkerchief. The color drained from her face so quickly she looked carved from salt. Richard rose halfway from his chair. Nolan's hand slipped from Amelia's chair. Amelia finally looked at me, and in her eyes I saw fear, sorrow, and something stronger than both. Relief. I walked down the center aisle. Each step sounded small, but the silence made it thunder. When I reached the stage, Margaret tried to block the microphone. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. I gently took the microphone from her hand. My name is Evelyn Harper, I said. And I was never in rehab. A gasp moved through the ballroom like wind striking the sea. I told them I had spent the last 4 years serving with international medical relief teams. I told them about floodwater, field clinics, emergency shelters, and wounded strangers whose names my mother had never bothered to learn. I told them I had written home every month. Samuel stepped forward and opened the gray metal box. 48 letters lay inside, stacked like buried years brought back to daylight. I lifted the first envelope and read the words my mother had written across it. Patient refuses contact. Margaret lunged toward the microphone. She is confused, she cried. She has always been unstable. Before the lie could grow legs, Claire's camera light snapped on. The white glare cut across the ballroom and landed on Nolan. Claire stepped forward with a microphone of her own. Her voice was calm, sharp, and merciless. She asked him why a charity created for young women in recovery had sent private monthly payments to Lily Monroe, a former yacht club employee. She asked why donor money had been routed through hidden accounts. She asked why legal threats from Lily's family had been answered not with accountability, but with a fake story about his sister. Nolan went pale. His perfect face collapsed. Richard shouted for security, but no one moved. The guests were already pulling out their phones, calling lawyers, canceling checks, backing away from the Harper name as if it had caught fire. Amelia stood. She removed the diamond necklace first and placed it beside Nolan's untouched wineglass. Then she slid off her wedding ring and set it down with a soft click that seemed louder than all the panic in the room. She walked toward me without looking back. Margaret sank into the chair behind the podium. Richard kept shouting. Nolan kept stammering. But their voices no longer mattered. The room had stopped believing them. 1 month later, Briarport was quieter. The fund was under federal investigation. My Parents' accounts were frozen. Nolan's name had vanished from club boards and charity pages. Amelia had taken a counseling position at a public school in Portland. Samuel still delivered mail by the harbor, though now he smiled whenever he saw me. We met at a small diner near the docks on a rainy morning, the kind of place my parents would never enter. The coffee was strong, the windows fogged, and the company honest. For the first time in years, I felt no need to prove I existed. Toxic people can steal your story for a season, but they cannot own the truth forever. Lies need constant polishing. Truth only needs one open door. If this story touched something in you, tell me in the comments whether you have ever had to reclaim your name from people who tried to rewrite your life. Like this video, subscribe to Still Waters Payback, and stay with us for more stories where silence ends and truth finally walks into the room.